China's rise to global power is unstoppable, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. Most people think sanctions can slow it. Some think technology bans will stop it. A few believe the West still holds the upper hand. But when you line up the actual numbers, the graduates, the patents, the steel, the ships, the ports, the cars, the chips, a completely different picture emerges. One that most people never see, because no one has laid it all out in one place. Here's one number to set the tone. China graduates roughly 4 million STEM students every single year. The United States graduates around 800,000. You heard that right. China is producing 5 times the technical talent of America every year without stopping. That gap doesn't shrink, it compounds. What you're about to see isn't one strong industry. It's an entire system, stacked, interlocked, and accelerating. China's STEM talent pipeline. You already heard the number. 4 million STEM graduates every single year. But let's make sure that actually lands, because most people hear a statistic and move on without feeling what it means. Imagine every single person in Los Angeles, every man, woman, and child, graduating with a science, technology, engineering, or mathematics degree. Now do that 3 times over. That's what China produces in a single year. The United States produces enough to fill Los Angeles once. You heard that right, and this isn't a one-time surge. This has been happening year after year for over a decade. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. It's not just the volume, it's what that volume does over time. Every year, those graduates enter labs, factories, research institutions, and tech companies. They build on the work of the graduates before them. The knowledge base doesn't reset, it stacks. China isn't just producing more engineers than America. It's building a compounding intellectual infrastructure that widens every single year. Then comes the part most people miss entirely. A large portion of those graduates feed directly into state-backed research programs, military-civil fusion projects, and the very industries this video is about to walk you through. Talent isn't sitting idle. It's being deployed at a national level, with coordination and funding that no private sector-driven economy can fully replicate. The United States has long believed that quality beats quantity, that a smaller number of elite researchers outperforms a massive but average workforce. And for decades, that argument had merit. But at a certain scale, quantity doesn't just compete with quality, it starts producing quality of its own. When you're running millions of experiments, publishing millions of papers, and filing millions of patents every year, breakthroughs stop being rare. They become statistically inevitable. The talent pipeline alone wouldn't be enough to explain China's rise. But paired with what that talent is actually producing, the patents, the technology leads, the critical innovations, the picture becomes almost impossible to argue against. And those patents tell a story that's even harder to ignore. China's patent dominance. Most people think of patents as paperwork, bureaucratic filings that lawyers argue over in courtrooms. But patents are actually a map, a real-time map of where innovation is happening, who owns it, and who will control the future industries built on top of it. So, when China's patent office accounted for 49% of all global patent applications in a single year, that wasn't a filing statistic. That was a declaration. Nearly half of every new idea formally registered on this planet originated in China. The United States, Europe, Japan, South Korea, the rest of the world combined, made up the other 51%. Let that sit for a second. One country, filing almost as many patents as every other nation on Earth put together. But raw filing numbers only tell part of the story. Here's where the tension really builds. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute, ASPI, published its Critical Technology Tracker in 2024. Their researchers went through the data on 64 technologies that will define the next several decades. Things like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced radar, hypersonic systems, electric batteries, and synthetic biology. Technologies that will shape economies, militaries, and entire ways of life. China was leading in 57 of those 64 categories. You heard that right, 57 out of 64. This isn't a country catching up. This is a country that has already arrived in most of the rooms that matter and is setting the agenda in nearly all of them. The United States and its allies lead in only a handful of the remaining categories, and even those leads are narrowing. What makes this genuinely alarming if you're sitting in Washington, Brussels, or Tokyo is that technology leadership compounds just like talent does. The country that leads in battery technology today builds the best EVs tomorrow. The country that leads in AI research today builds the most capable systems next year. Every patent filed is a foundation for the next one. China isn't just winning a technology race, it's rewriting the track. And all of that innovation needs somewhere to be built. That's where the steel comes in. The steel beneath everything. Before you can understand China's global power, you need to understand something fundamental about how the modern world is built. Every ship, every bridge, every skyscraper, every railway track, every wind turbine, every military vessel, all of it starts with steel. Steel is not a commodity. Steel is civilization's backbone. And China produces more of it than the rest of the world combined. In 2024, China produced approximately 1,018 million tons of crude steel. Global output that same year was roughly 1,890 million tons. That means China alone accounted for around 54% of everything the world made. You heard that right. More than half of all the steel produced on Earth came from one country. To put that in terms you can feel, the United States produced around 80 million tons that same year. China outproduced America by nearly 1 billion tons. That's not a gap. That's a different category of industrial existence. But here's the tension that most people don't sit with. Steel production isn't just about building things at home. It gives China the ability to build things everywhere, faster and cheaper than any competitor. When China decides to construct a port in Africa, a railway in Southeast Asia, or a stadium in South America, it isn't waiting on supply chains. It brings the supply chain with it. That's an economic and geopolitical weapon that most Western nations simply cannot replicate. And China hasn't just scaled steel production, it has modernized it. Chinese steel mills are among the most technologically advanced on the planet, increasingly powered by cleaner energy inputs and managed with AI-driven efficiency systems. The old narrative of Chinese manufacturing being cheap but low quality has quietly expired. The new reality is cheap, high volume, and increasingly high quality. When you control 54% of the world's steel output, you don't just build structures, you build dependencies. Other countries need your steel to develop. Your prices shape their economies. Your supply decisions move global markets. China's industrial base isn't a supporting character in this story. It is the story. But raw production power only matters if you can move it. And what China has built to move its output across the planet is unlike anything the world has ever seen. Infrastructure no one can match. There's a moment most Western travelers describe when they first arrive in Shanghai, Shenzhen, or Chengdu. It's not wonder exactly, it's something closer to disorientation. Because the infrastructure surrounding them is more advanced, more seamless, and more modern than almost anything they've seen at home. And that feeling is not nostalgia or bias, it's data. China operates over 25,000 miles of high-speed rail. The United States operates 0. You heard that right. The wealthiest nation in the history of the world has not completed a single dedicated high-speed rail line, while China has built a network that could wrap around the Earth's equator and still have thousands of miles left over. But rail is just the beginning. China has constructed over 140 airports since 2000. It has built entire cities, not neighborhoods, not districts, but fully functioning cities in under a decade. The Jiaozhou Bay Bridge stretches over 26 miles across open water. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, the longest sea-crossing bridge on Earth, spans over 34 miles. These are not architectural curiosities. They are the circulatory system of the world's largest goods-producing economy. Here's where the tension builds. Infrastructure is not just about convenience. Infrastructure is leverage. Every mile of high-speed rail reduces logistics costs. increases labor mobility, and connects manufacturing zones to ports with a speed that competitors cannot match. Every new airport opens a region to global commerce. Every bridge or tunnel tightens supply chains by hours or days, and in global manufacturing, hours and days are money. The payoff becomes clear when you zoom out. China didn't build all of this by accident or for show. It built it because infrastructure is what allows scale to function. 4 million STEM graduates need universities, labs, and transit. 1 billion tons of steel need railways and ports to move. 57 leading critical technologies need energy, connectivity, and physical space to develop. China built the operating system for its own dominance, and it built it in concrete, steel, and fiber optic cable at a pace the rest of the world is still struggling to comprehend. And the ports that sit at the end of all those railways and bridges? They don't just serve China, they serve the world on China's terms. China's global port network. Picture a chessboard. Now imagine that one player has pieces not just on their side of the board, but positioned on nearly every square that matters, on every continent on the planet. That's not a metaphor for China's port strategy. That's a description of it. Chinese entities are currently tied to 129 overseas port projects, active port interests on every continent except Antarctica. From the port of Piraeus in Greece, the gateway to European markets, to Gwadar in Pakistan, Hambantota in Sri Lanka, and multiple facilities along the African coastline, China has quietly built one of the most far-reaching maritime networks in modern history. But here's where most people stop thinking deeply enough. Ports aren't just loading docks. Ports are choke points. Whoever controls a port controls what moves through it, how fast it moves, what it costs, and sometimes whether it moves at all. In an era where 90% of global trade travels by sea, controlling port infrastructure is one of the most direct forms of economic leverage that exists. The tension is this. Many of these port investments were welcomed by host countries as development aid or infrastructure partnerships. Low-income nations received financing they couldn't get elsewhere, and ports got built. But the terms of those deals, the operational rights, the debt structures, the long-term lease agreements mean that Chinese entities retain significant influence over facilities that sit inside other countries' borders. This isn't conspiracy. It's documented. And it's strategic. The payoff lands when you connect the ports back to everything else. China produces 54% of the world's steel. It holds 71% of global shipbuilding orders. It exports more cars than any other nation on Earth. All of that production needs to move, and increasingly, it moves through infrastructure that China either owns, operates, or has significant contractual influence over. You're not just looking at a trading nation. You're looking at a country that has built the physical architecture of global commerce, piece by piece, port by port. And the ships filling those ports? More than half of them were built in China too. That's where this story goes next. Shipbuilding stranglehold. There's an old rule in geopolitics. Whoever builds the ships controls the seas. And right now, that rule points in one direction. In 2024, China captured approximately 71% of global shipbuilding orders. Not a plurality, not a slim majority. Nearly 3/4 of every major vessel commissioned on the planet was ordered from a Chinese shipyard. The United States, by comparison, holds less than 1% of global commercial shipbuilding market share. You heard that right, less than 1%. But here's the tension most analysts skip past. Shipbuilding isn't just a commercial industry. It's a strategic one. The same shipyards that produce container vessels and bulk carriers also produce the naval vessels, Coast Guard ships, and maritime support infrastructure that project military and economic power across oceans. When your shipbuilding capacity dwarfs the rest of the world, you don't just dominate trade, you dominate the oceans those trade routes run through. China's shipyards are also increasingly efficient. The Jiangnan shipyard in Shanghai is among the most advanced in the world, capable of producing vessels at a speed and cost that South Korean and Japanese competitors, once the global leaders, are struggling to match. Labor costs, steel access, and state backing have combined to create a shipbuilding machine that operates at a scale no single competitor can replicate. The payoff is almost uncomfortably straightforward. China produces the steel. China builds the ships. China controls significant port infrastructure on every major continent. The entire supply chain of global maritime trade, from raw material to vessel to destination port, increasingly runs through Chinese hands. That's not dominance in one part of the system. That's dominance across the whole pipeline. And while China was quietly taking over the world's oceans, it was also staging a takeover on the world's roads, one electric vehicle at a time. The electric vehicle takeover. A few years ago, the story of Chinese cars was simple: cheap, unreliable, and irrelevant outside of Asia. That story is now completely dead. In 2025, China exported 8.5 million vehicles, more than any other country on Earth, surpassing Japan and Germany to become the world's largest car exporter. But the number alone doesn't capture what's actually happening, because it's not just how many cars China is exporting, it's what kind. China now accounts for approximately 40% of all global electric vehicle exports. Brands like BYD have moved from budget curiosities to genuine competitive threats in some of the world's most demanding markets. In April 2025, BYD overtook Tesla in European battery electric vehicle sales. You heard that right, a Chinese automaker outsold Elon Musk's company in Europe on Tesla's most important international turf. Here's where the tension sharpens. This isn't just about price, though price matters enormously. BYD and its peers have built vehicles that compete on software integration, battery range, charging speed, and interior technology. The narrative that Chinese EVs win only because they're cheap is crumbling in real time. They're winning because they've closed the quality gap while keeping the cost advantage, a combination that Western automakers have not yet figured out how to counter. The deeper issue is vertical integration. BYD manufactures its own batteries, its own chips, and increasingly its own software stack. That means lower costs, faster iteration cycles, and immunity from the supply chain disruptions that have repeatedly hammered Western and Japanese automakers. When you control every layer of your own product, you can move faster than competitors who depend on outside suppliers for critical components. The payoff is a global auto industry in the middle of a forced restructuring. European brands are lobbying their governments for tariff protection. American manufacturers are scrambling to accelerate EV development. And China keeps shipping 8.5 million vehicles last year, and the trajectory points higher. But cars run on energy, and what China has built in the energy sector doesn't just power its auto industry, it may determine who wins the age of artificial intelligence itself. Energy that defines AI. Here's something that rarely gets said clearly enough. The AI race is not primarily a software race. It's an energy race. Training large AI models, running inference at scale, and powering the data centers that make all of it possible requires staggering amounts of electricity. Whoever controls cheap, abundant, reliable energy controls the ceiling on what their AI industry can achieve. China understood this earlier than almost anyone, and it built accordingly. The Three Gorges Dam, already the largest hydropower station on Earth, generates 22,500 megawatts of capacity. That single structure produces more power than most countries consume in total. But China didn't stop there. The Baihetan hydropower station, completed in 2021, added another 16,000 megawatts. China has also installed more solar power capacity than the rest of the world combined, and its wind power installations broke global records for 3 consecutive years running. Here's the tension. The West debates energy transition. China executes it at a scale that makes the debate feel almost academic. While American and European energy policy moves through legislative cycles and public consultations, China approves and builds gigawatt-scale projects in timeframes that would be considered impossible elsewhere. The result is an energy infrastructure that is not only massive, but rapidly modernizing. The payoff connects directly to AI dominance. Chinese tech companies are building data centers at a pace matched only by American hyperscalers, but with access to cheaper electricity, domestically manufactured chips, and state-level support that removes most of the friction their Western counterparts face. Energy abundance doesn't just reduce costs, it removes ceilings. It allows experimentation at scales that resource-constrained competitors cannot afford. The country that can run the most compute for the longest time at the lowest cost will train the most capable AI systems. And the country building the most energy infrastructure right now is China. But there's one battlefield where the West thought it still held the decisive advantage: the semiconductor. And what happened when America tried to use that advantage as a weapon is the most important part of this entire story. The chip war backfires. For years, the semiconductor was considered the ultimate choke point, the one link in the chain that China couldn't replicate, couldn't buy its way around, and couldn't build fast enough to matter. The thinking in Washington was straightforward. If you control the most advanced chips, you control the ceiling on Chinese technology. Cut off the supply, and you slow the rise. So the United States pressured the Netherlands to block ASML, the only company on Earth that manufactures extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, from selling its most advanced systems to Chinese customers. Not a single EUV machine has ever been delivered to a customer in China. The export controls were real, the enforcement was serious, and for a moment, it looked like the strategy might work. But this was just the beginning of China's response, and the response was nothing like what Washington expected. Instead of stalling, China accelerated. The Chinese government deployed billions of dollars into domestic semiconductor equipment development, alternative lithography research, and a full-stack chip ecosystem designed to replace every foreign choke point over time. Companies like SMIC pushed their domestic processes further than outside observers thought possible. Huawei shocked the industry in 2023 by shipping a smartphone built on a 7-nanometer chip produced entirely within China, a chip that, by official estimates, shouldn't have existed yet. Here's the payoff, and it's the one that should genuinely unsettle anyone who believed export controls were a long-term solution. Sanctions didn't stop China's semiconductor ambitions. They funded them. By removing access to foreign technology, the West gave China the most powerful political justification imaginable to build its own. Every restriction became a recruitment poster for domestic chip engineers. Every blocked shipment became a budget line in a national self-reliance program. China may not produce the world's most advanced chips today, but it is building the infrastructure, the talent base, and the institutional knowledge to close that gap. And it is doing so with the full financial and political weight of the Chinese state behind it. And that is the final piece of the puzzle. Because what you've just seen across every chapter of this video isn't a collection of separate strengths. 4 million STEM graduates feed the patents. The patents drive the technology leads. The technology leads power the factories. The factories produce the steel. The steel builds the ships. The ships fill the ports. The ports move the cars. The cars run on batteries, developed through years of state-funded innovation. The energy powers the AI. And when the West tried to cut one thread, the chip China didn't unravel. It started weaving its own. This is what an unstoppable rise actually looks like. Not one miracle, not one industry, not one lucky decade. A system stacked, compounding, and accelerating, where every advantage feeds the next one, and where every attempt to slow it down becomes fuel for the next breakthrough.